Good morning, good morning. You're going to hear a lot about technology over the next 2 days or so. One thing you did not know is that we are not just a technology provider, we are an accessory provider. So we've got shoes, we've also got scarves. Who got their scarf out there, right? So if you didn't dress for the weather, totally fine. Hopefully a scarf will help out in that regard. So today we're going to spend some time talking about Fin, which is the Fintech Integration Network. I have to have this disclaimer slide up here if I want my badge to work this week. So anything that we talk about dates-wise is just estimates. I don't think I have any dates in here, but I was told to put the slide. Here's the slide. We've talked about it. Let's move on. So the Fintech Integration Network, Fin for short, really kind of represents our, I'll say, paradigm shift. So by a quick show of hands, if we've got our fintechs or our vendors here in the room, who was on our current VIP channel doing integrations, right? So we've got quite a few of you out there. So VIP is something that we transformed or shifted into Fin in July of last year. And so, one of the things that we wanted to do was to sort of transform the way that we provide support to our vendors in our fintechs, but also think about how we can create efficiency gains for you as our fintechs and our vendors, so that you can hopefully provide faster to market solutions for our mutual FIs, but also at the same time have more access to a wider range of not just the enterprise APIs, but as well as the documentation and the materials that are associated with them. So by way of introduction, my name's Alex Christenson. I am one of the vendor relations managers here at Jack Henry. I've been with Jack Henry for 18 years, which sounds like a long time, but as you heard, Mac's been here for 22. I'm actually one of the most junior people in my area, which is pretty crazy. But one of the awesome things about having tenure like that, but also having folks that you work with, that you report to, that have even more, is that you're able to kind of get so many of those experiences, as well as some of the things that they've come across in their travels, to kind of help frame a lot of that context. When we talk about integrations and the knowledge of what some of these vendors and the fintechs are doing in this space, it just becomes really exciting to see that intersection of technology and new ideas. I cut my teeth actually starting with, I would say, an integration, right? I initially worked as an analyst on the IVR system. If you guys remember those, the interactive voice teller, I think they still have those. Some people must still call in, right, to get some information. But then as I moved into product management, one of the big products that I managed was cash automation. So for those of you who work with recyclers, cash dispensers, and things like that, we created a joint project where we did this middleware integration with one of our leading middleware providers that interfaces with those machines. And that experience kind of helped frame a lot for me in terms of understanding what it is that vendors need in terms of requirements, what it is that they're looking for from the core, and what their general expectations are when it comes to a framework for the integration. So today we're going to talk, obviously the lion's share will be about Fin, right, our Fintech Integration Network. We'll talk a bit about what that means in terms of where we came from VIP, and sort of what we've moved into lately. I'll spend a little bit of time talking about jackhenry.dev. So for those of you who are not aware, jackhenry.dev, I like to think of that as kind of our front door, right? It's the one-stop shop for all things integration. If you are looking to find out information about an existing integration that you're working on, jackhenry.dev is going to have that. If you are kicking the tires and you're a fintech that says, hey, you know what, we're not quite in the space yet and we want to sort of move into working with Jack Henry to support some of these FIs, jackhenry.dev is going to be where the proverbial tires can be kicked. And then we'll spend some time talking about the technical account manager role. This is something we're really excited about. From a support standpoint, it really represents a kind of a culmination of a lot of ways that we wanted to provide support to you as vendors in a very white glove concierge type of way. So we'll talk about some of the benefits of what a TAM means, what that represents to you, and hopefully how it can help and kind of supercharge a lot of your development efforts that we have. So let's start, kind of looking back at what VIP was in the past. Before with VIP, if you wanted to do an integration with Jack Henry, admittedly, there were different programs that supported different things, right? So if you wanted to do a integration with Scimitar and connect to the Scimitar core for some of our credit union clients, you'd have to have a Scimitar VIP contract. If you wanted to do it for a bank, you'd have to have a JExchange banking VIP contract. These represented separate and disparate programs, right, that came with their own sets of pricing, possibly came with their own types of support models, different sandboxes, things like that. The onboarding even might have had a little bit different of a flavor. And so we wanted to take a look at that and say, how do we create an ecosystem here where you as the fintech or the vendor is having a very same experience between the different APIs that you're consuming. And so what Fin represents is taking all of these things that you see, right? You have SimExchange VIP, Banking VIP, maybe you've dabbled in iPay, PayCenter, things like that, and putting that under one program, under one contract, and then, of course, really driving home that idea of one Jack Henry. And so in the spirit of doing that, what we've been able to do is provide access to more things for you at really a fraction of the cost. So just by way of example, if you wanted to do, in the past, Jack Henry VIP for banking, and if you wanted to do Scimitar VIP for credit unions, you were looking at close to $50,000 between just those two programs. What I like to kind of refer to as the Costco membership, if you will, for $5,000, it gets you into Fin. You've now got access to an entire warehouse, so to speak, of enterprise APIs. So if you wanted to just start working, let's say, with SimExchange and sort of get that under your belt, you can join Fin for $5,000 flat. Get in there, you have a sandbox environment that we would provide to you. And let's say that 6 months down the road, 18 months down the road, you start talking to some banks, some community banks, and say, hey, we want to start digging into this. For no additional fees, you're now inside the Costco warehouse, you've got access to the enterprise APIs for JExchange, whether that's the SOAP, whether you have JXR for JExchange REST. You're able to now start dabbling in those things without any additional investment. And so that's really the beauty of Fin, is us saying, hey, we want to be as open as possible. As Ben likes to say a lot, we want to remove these toll gates. And so it's not just removing the toll gates from a pricing standpoint, but it's also not gatekeeping a lot of the access to the enterprise APIs, the documentation that we have. We want to get all of that out there available to you, because if we can put you in a position to succeed, then we're putting our clients and our customers in that same position to succeed for their members and their customers. So let's talk a little bit about why we've kind of made this shift, right? So we talked about these expanded opportunities, and there's a couple different use cases here that really come to mind, and these are some actual real-world things that we have come across, right? So you've got a lot of vendors, perhaps, that are coming into the space that are maybe early in their funding series. You've got some vendors that are kind of early on in just their startup mode, right? But even more so, you have some vendors. We had one in particular that was coming from the healthcare industry, right? A totally separate vertical, right? They had maybe a payments platform that they wanted to bring in, but they really didn't know much about the fintech space or financial services, let alone the Jack Henry core. And so for us to be able to do this, we can say you're not having to really feel out a lot of the stuff that you would have in the past. For a pretty nominal investment, you're able to start getting in here and start playing around in the sandbox environments that we have. One of the challenges that we came across was specifically for those vendors and fintechs that were talking to both banks and credit unions. I mentioned that pretty significant upfront cost to get into what was the VIP program. They were having to make a business choice, right? There was a business decision there, as cost is always a prevailing constraint, right? They were having to say, do we want to go with banks because there's a bigger opportunity here, but we're really talking to these credit unions over here on this side, and maybe we should go with that. And so unfortunately, some conversations had to be put on pause, right? Because they said, for this budget cycle, we can only really tackle JExchange right now. SimExchange is it's something that's going to have to wait, or vice versa, right? So we had a couple of those things, and we really wanted to get away from that. We didn't want to put you as fintechs or vendors in a position where you had to say no to our customers and say, well, I can't do it because of cost, right? That doesn't really help us tell the story of being as open as possible, and again, it kind of puts some gates on what it is that you can accomplish. So beyond that, one of the things that we have shifted as well is creating a more extensible support model. So in the past, you would have to deal with what I kind of consider a legacy ticketing system, right? So you would open a case, and that case would get assigned to an engineer, and then you'd kind of go back and forth through a case, which we're all kind of used to, right, from a CRM standpoint. But what we wanted to say is, how do we put you as fintechs, as the vendors, more in the driver's seat? How do we allow you to be a better determinant in terms of how you're getting your support, where you're getting your support from? Can you get it when you need it without having to actually go through somebody? And so jackhenry.dev really represents that single pane of glass so that whatever API you're working on, you're able to actually go out there on your own time, do your own homework, so to speak, but have as much access to this API documentation as possible. So beyond that, let's say that you've gone out to jackhenry.dev and you've done the homework and you've looked through a lot of the WSDLs and the API stuff, and you say, I still have questions. One of the things that we offer through Fin, which is great, and it's something that has been a really big success and it continues to grow month after month, is our developer office hours. How many of you have been to a developer office hours already, right? So it's a great way for you. We offer these things every month. It's about an hour and a half. And you can sign up for it and come into these office hours and ask whatever technical questions you might have. So let's just say in that 30-month span, in between the time that we have these developer office hours, you've got some questions that have come up in the course of your development. We're bringing our entire brain pan of our experts, our SMEs that are well-versed in JExchange, SimExchange, everything else, and you can come on and ask these real-time questions and dig a little bit deeper. And we've had a lot of examples like that, where people have gone out to jackhenry.dev, they've looked through the documentation, they said, what, I really want to kind of get to that next layer, right? I'm making this call in JExchange or SimExchange, but I really need to understand how is that actually working in the core. If I put this value here, what is the behavior that I should expect? And those are the things that, you're not necessarily going to understand those nuances just by reading the documentation, but certainly with the developer office hours, it's a chance for you to kind of get those answers from the experts themselves. And then beyond that, and this is part of what I'll be talking about a little later, is this concierge support, right? And this is represented by our TAM, which is our technical account managers. And we'll talk a little bit about the benefits of what that concierge support means for you, specifically for those that are either doing a lot of projects or those that maybe just need a bit of a jump start to a single initiative. The last thing I want to talk about here is that simplified contracting, right? So we talked before about how each of these integrations in the past represented a different cost model, a different cost structure. But beyond that, one thing that we have done in Fin is we've gotten away from this idea where we need to monitor and track every single product that you are looking to integrate. So by way of example, in the past, let's say that you had that SimExchange VIP contract and you had the JExchange VIP contract, but you also had a portfolio of different products. So you had product A, product B, product C on both sides. So by factors of multiplication, if you had 3 different products in your portfolio and you had 2 different integrations, you're looking at 6 contracts that you had to administer, make sure that you knew when the renewals were up, make sure that you understand kind of the ins and outs of each of those and what the dependencies are. Under Fin, we've done away with a lot of that. So again, all of this membership fee is really covering your access to do as many integrations as you feel like you need to do. So if it's JExchange, if it's SimExchange, if you've got 7 products in your portfolio, no additional cost there, and you're able to kind of utilize everything that we have to offer through the program. First day with a clicker, sorry. So here is jackhenry.dev. I'm going to leave this up here for a couple minutes, but what we want to do is give you a chance to kind of scan the QR code. I would really encourage you, if you haven't looked at this yet, get that link on your phone during the break or whenever is convenient. Start poking around on there. Like I said, this is really the front door, and we're inviting you guys to take a look at everything that we have to offer from an API documentation standpoint. There's a couple examples here that I wanted to sort of draw your attention to. These are really the menus, for example, for JExchange as well as for SimExchange. So as you can see, if we go back to that use case before about how you might be new to the space, we've got tutorials and getting started guides here. So a lot of times if you're a new vendor and it's one of those situations where you don't know what you don't know, this is really going to be helpful to understand a lot of the references that are in the APIs. SimExchange is another area where we've got installation and configuration documentation. We have parameter service mappings. This is an area that has been specifically helpful for those vendors who say, I really need to know what it is that these parameters are doing on the core, but specifically going a level deeper to understand the values that are created within those SOAP envelopes. This is an area here on jackhenry.dev that we actually just added recently. And so this, I think, really speaks to the technology modernization that we're going through, right? So every time we learn something new, let's say that we're going to the developer office hours, and we've got questions that we realize, hey, you know, maybe that could be a little better out on jackhenry.dev. We're constantly adding to the jackhenry.dev content. So this is actually something that one of our TAMs did, Nelson Truitt, who's actually here at DevCon. We had an internal Scimitar knowledge base for all things SimExchange. But unfortunately, it was something that we hadn't really exposed, admittedly, to vendors and fintechs for you to use. And so using that old example of the case management system, you'd have to open up a case, and if you had a specific question, let's say about certificates, or you had a specific question about loans, or how does SimExchange work for cards, it's something you'd have to go through the case rigmarole to kind of understand. Now what we've done is we've taken a lot of that tribal knowledge, the internal knowledge, and we've gotten it out here onto jackhenry.dev. So you can very quickly, very efficiently sort of move into a mode where you're able to access the information specific to the area of integration that you're most concerned with. So the last thing I want to kind of talk about today is the technical account manager concierge service that we've talked about. So this is really sort of the culmination, right? We've talked about different modes of support that you have, right? You can go to jackhenry.dev. If you needed a little bit more interaction and going to a level deeper, you can come to our developer office hours. But if you are a vendor that really needs to kind of jumpstart or have a launch pad for how you're doing integrations, the TAM, or the technical account manager, is sort of how you do that. So I have a term up here called best practicer. It's not a real word, but it is something that I think provides a lot of value, because when you are going through your integrations, right, you need someone that's going to be able to understand what are the best practices as it relates to the core, but also what are the best practices as it relates to using these APIs, right? One of the most expensive phrases that we have in project management, or even business in general, is we'll figure it out when we get there. Right? A TAM is going to be that person that's going to help you figure it out, so that you're not having to take some shots in the dark once you're in that sandbox, or try to figure out things as you go. You've got someone that will help bridge those gaps and help kind of future-proof the solutions that you're designing and that you're creating. You know, one of the things that we found from a use case standpoint is you might have a beta client that you're working with, right? And they have some pretty specific requirements for what it is that they want for that particular integration. But you know, that, of course, may not represent any future clients that you have. And so a TAM is going to be that person that has, in their travels, seen what maybe what the rule is rather than what the exception is. And so they can help you kind of see around that corner and say, look, the design you have is great, right? It's going to work for this beta client. It's very sound. But maybe have you considered designing it this way, because this will actually address a lot of the considerations that maybe more of our clients have than just this particular one. And you know, in so doing, you're seeing a lot of cost savings, a lot of time savings, as far as the resources that you might otherwise need to commit to that and figure out those things down the road. The last thing I want to mention here on the TAM is that it's billed monthly. And this is a pretty big advantage to you as fintechs, because using that use case of having that jumpstart, having that launchpad initially, you're not having to commit to something that's going on an annual basis. If you want to get into a project and you need somebody for a 30-day span, you've got a TAM that's available to you so that you can glean and get as much from that person in that first month as you possibly can. And what we're finding, some of the feedback that we've had from folks, is that has been a huge help in terms of them not having to go out and really find that information. Just say, hey, I need to pick up the phone. I've got a bat phone to my TAM. We've got these 4 questions. If we can get those answered in a 30-minute call, that has been well worth our time, well worth our investment. So if you do that monthly, what you can do is utilize the TAM for your initial integration, but also, again, later down the road, if you, in 6 months or in 18 months, you have another project, get a TAM for another 30 days. Because these are folks that are ready to jump into the integrations that you have and really help you kind of weed through some of that stuff. One of the last things I'll mention here, who's going to the hackathon this evening? Right. So as we talk about this intersection of technology and really trying to play around in the tech stack that Jack Henry has, there's an additional event coming up here this summer called See You Build. If you guys are interested in getting your hands on some of this tech, playing around with some of the APIs that you're actually seeing in a sandbox, that's another great event, great opportunity to kind of do that with some of the vendors that we have on Fin. What we're finding with Fin is it's a great place for not just competition, but co-opetition, right? We want our vendors to really utilize some of this stuff as an incubator to say, hey, here's some ideas that I haven't thought about before, and now that we actually have access to the broader API set, we're starting to think about things in new ways. We're starting to let those creative juices start to flow in new paradigms that we haven't really moved towards. So with that, we will be available at the break. I think Jaime is going to come back out here. But certainly, if you've got questions about the Fin channel, maybe you're currently on VIP and you're interested in how you can maybe move towards that to take advantage of the TAM or any other things, find us at the break, anybody in a gray shirt, and we'd be happy to chat with you about that. Thanks.